Hey y'all, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming to you with a weekly reading vlog. I asked last week or the week before on my Instagram for some video ideas because the creative well was running dry. The number one thing requested on Instagram was more reading vlogs, which I think is kind of interesting because it seems like I've noticed a lot of creators saying on booktube that they feel like interest in their vlogs is waning, and I have felt the same, so I'm glad to hear that y'all still enjoy them. This week is going to be pretty casual. Last week I started a reading vlog that I'm not going to update or post on because I then got sick. I wrestled through the flu or something, and it's taken me what feels like a really long time to recover from that, and I still just want to lay down and go to sleep. I have no proof that that is connected to having the flu or having a really bad cold. I think that's just me in the heat. So I was going to update you right when I got home from work because I was wearing a really cute dress that everyone complimented me on today, but it is literally 85 degrees outside. It's early April. I'm getting sick of it already. Really, I am. But it was just best if you didn't see me in that position. So I went ahead and I showered and I collected all of the books that I am reading. I'm reading 3 or 4 things right now. One of these things I was tempted to make its own reading vlog, and so maybe I'll talk about that first. That is Petrarch. I started reading Petrarch's Canzoniere the other day, and I am thoroughly enjoying it. This is a collection of poems that he wrote across many, many years, and they are not in chronological order. They are just in the order that he chose to put them in. Like, he constantly revised this throughout his life. And I just was having so many early thoughts, not just about the poetry, but about him. It almost seemed to me like it deserved its own reading vlog. And so I'll decide that before I give you an initial update on this, really. But so far I'm enjoying it. The main book that I am reading, because my goal was to stop reading so many things at once. It really was. It was just to start reading one book at a time, but who am I? I'm a mood reader. And so the main book that I am reading is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. And I want to just say, I am thoroughly enjoying this. I am reading this primarily because I really want to read the prequel, Day of Fallen Night. I think that sounds really good, and it sounds far more interesting to me than Priory ever did. There's a reason why I haven't picked up Priory prior to this. And so I just decided to go in publication order because I tend to think that's just the way to go with fantasy. I've also heard Day of Fallen Night is simply a better written book. And so if you read that first and then you move back into Priory, you're possibly going to be pretty disappointed in this. So I made the executive decision to start here, and I started reading this while I was waiting for the second 2 books in the Jade City trilogy to come to me, and they arrived literally the day after I started this, and I thought, do I want to put this down? But I felt like if I didn't commit to this right now, when I'm excited about it, it's possibly not going to get done. And so this is a really, really long standalone fantasy book that is about dragons. And I'll say this book is sold in many different ways, but I know mainly that it's about dragons, and I know mainly that there is a sapphic relationship, a female-female relationship at the heart of this book. I am 270 pages in, maybe almost 300 pages in, so I'm at least a quarter of the way through. The romance has not figured into this whatsoever. And if you want to know the truth, the dragons have been fairly minimal. But the dragons are super cool. I want to just go on and say the dragons are incredibly interesting because they talk. That is not something I typically like. I really don't like dragons that talk. So sometimes that will turn me off of a fantasy. It honestly will. And when I got to a part that was talking about the dragons talking, I was like, oh no, I am not going to enjoy this because I don't like when dragons are talking. I mean, I just needed to trust the process because I am thoroughly enjoying this. And one of the dragons is easily the most interesting character to me. I am just really loving this. I don't know why I felt intimidated by it. One thing I'm going to tell you, this is a secret. If you've been intimidated by this, I truly think the publishers are playing games with us. Look at this. Look at the spacing on the bottom, the top, and to the sides of the text. It doesn't need to be this page count. I think, if you ask me, this is a 500 or 600 page book masquerading under 800 pages so that it looks like a really big feat. But I'm telling you, it's really readable. It's not confusing to me at all. I think the world is fascinating. I am just thoroughly enjoying this. I don't know that it's going to get 5 stars from me. If it really is a fully self-contained story, I think I'm probably going to be very happy with it. But a lot of times books of this length, they just truly do have to justify their page count. And if I feel like this is a truly contained story, I think I'm going to be very happy that she made it 1 book and not 2. I picked up at the library today for a readathon that is going on this month that is hosted by Roz from Scalladandling About the Books and a few other booktubers that is essentially kind of putting the focus on memoirs, on biographies, on just kind of getting to know a person. And I am fascinated by this readathon. I was going to make an entire TBR for this, but I knew April was going to go off the rails for me because I didn't realize that it was April until earlier this week. I truly did not realize that we had switched over to April. And so a week of the month at least has already gone by. But I picked up today at the library the Journals of Claremont, and this is just a collection of Claire's diaries. If you don't know who Claremont is, you can be forgiven because she's not all that famous, but she was the stepsister of Mary Shelley, and she was the mistress of Lord Byron. She very famously had a child with Lord Byron named Allegra, and I have been very fascinated by her this year in terms of the romantics. I think she has been the one that has intrigued me the most here in 2023. And after reading The Villa by Rachel Hawkins, which was a retelling of certain events in Mary Shelley and Claire's life, I really loved the emphasis that was put on Claire. And so I decided to see if a library had this around because this is out of print. They last printed her complete diaries like this in 1968. And it is a 500-page beast. I will be honest with you. I don't have a lot of hope for this in terms of it being engaging or page turning because diaries are often not nearly as interesting as we think they're going to be. Mary Shelley's diary, for instance, is not that interesting. She doesn't talk about any of the stuff that you would really like to hear her opinion on, which I think is very interesting. I think, though, Claire's going to go there. I really, truly do, because I feel like Claire was just somebody who liked drama and really wanted to be at the center of attention a lot of the time, and she never got there. And so I think she's going to go there. But I know for a fact that she went back and revised her diaries after the death of Mary Shelley specifically. But she went back and revised her diaries, I think, because she was the longest living of their circle. And she didn't like some of what her earlier self had said about Byron, Mary, or Percy. And I'm sure these are the edited versions. I'm sure the edited versions are all that remain. So I'll be interested to see how that goes. I don't know how much of that is going to get read in this vlog. And again, I don't know how much I'm going to get out of it in terms of enjoyment. But that's where I'm at right now. I'm still debating on just making an entire Petrarch reading vlog. Maybe I'll do that. I think that would be kind of fun. Hi, and welcome to the messiest desk area of all time. I thought I would update you on Priory of the Orange Tree while I get this stuff cleaned up and while I cut some pictures. So I'm still really enjoying it. I want to go on and get that out of the way. I'm about 300 or so pages in. It does not feel nearly as long as what you might think based on the page count. I truly do think they've kind of just gamed the system a little bit. They really wanted you to think the book was long and was going to be a really big feat. And I think it kind of is, but honestly, I am really, truly enjoying it in a way that I did not expect, because I think it's been very, very fun. And I think the intrigue is interesting. So we have 4 main perspectives. I don't know that I said that when we got started, but we do have 4 main perspectives, and 2 of them are guys, 2 of them are girls. This is often talked about as kind of like a big feminist fantasy. And I hate to be like this, honestly I do, but I prefer the male POVs, because one of these guys, Loth is his name, he is kind of a Robert Dudley type figure in that the queen of one country in the West has been single, she needs to get married, and she can't really be seen to be having a close relationship with him is essentially the problem. And so he has been exiled, and he basically has his own quest that feels entirely different to everything else in the book. I mean that in the best way possible, because I really think the intrigue that he is experiencing is very interesting. And so generally the entire setup for the world is based on how different parts of the world in the East, the West, and in the South are all interpreting dragons differently and all feel very differently about dragons. And specifically, like in the East, dragons are worshipped. In the West, they are villains. They have essentially been asleep in the West, and they're viewed, you know, as very, very terrible. So what we're doing today is I'm trying to trim pictures. These are all really big pictures, so I'm not really going to trim these down. I'm just going to take the hard edge off of them, because I do cut album photo books. If you're in the K-pop world, don't judge me. But to me, easily the most interesting thing is Loth, because he's like been exiled to a country that has decided to accept dragons as like their religious overlords. And he basically is on his own quest to find out what happened to the queen's father who was sent there. It's really fascinating. One of the perspectives is a girl who's a handmaiden to this queen, Sabrin. And her perspective is interesting, but I don't think her character is that interesting. And that is what I really wanted to update about. I really just wanted to talk about the fact that Mari from My Name is Marinez recently uploaded a video where she vlogged and reviewed Priory of the Orange Tree in a series alongside many other booktubers. They all did this, which is basically, did BookTok or BookTube fool me? Was something actually overhyped and it's actually really terrible? And she chose to read Priory. Not to spoil that video for you, which of course I will link to down below, but she did not like it at all. She really did not. And normally, when I am reading a book and I'm really enjoying it, a negative review doesn't often mean that much to me, because it doesn't really take away my enjoyment. But in this case, seeing her negative review has actually, in general, reframed all of my thoughts about the book, because I think her critiques are really, really good. Actually, that looks incredible. I think I really cut that straight originally, but let's just make sure. But she really critiqued the writing style, and I think one of her big issues is kind of the way that the book is, on the one hand, overwritten because it is very, very long. On the other hand, it is underwritten because things that you're really interested in do tend to appear off page or happen off page. And I personally like that, because one of the perspectives is of someone who wants to become a dragon rider and they're having to go through trials to become a dragon rider. I just don't care about that stuff, you know? I don't care about watching people train or like a training montage. And this book essentially did a montage rather than focusing each chapter of hers on one of the trials. And I personally really appreciated that because I didn't feel like I needed it. But I can see that that might have been something that was a selling point for someone, that they really wanted to see someone become a dragon rider. And they really were robbed of that. But to me, that's never what the selling point of the book was. So I'm personally happy with that. And I also, in general, just really like the way certain scenes have been clipped down to make way for dialogue, or what everyone in fantasy truly hates, which is the so-called info dump. Now me, I love an info dump because I actually just appreciate getting information. I don't really care if you give it to me in, you know, a paragraph form, if you give it to me in dialogue. This book's kind of shtick is that someone will ask someone else to tell a story about the world, and then you'll get like this whole long exposition in terms of a story where someone will just tell you something that's very pertinent to what's going on in the current chapter. And so I can see, again, that's irritating. Me as a fantasy reader, it's never bothered me. It truly has not ever bothered me to get an info dump, just because, again, I appreciate the information. But I know a lot of people would rather that just be integrated more fully and more organically within the plot. I don't mind it. I really, truly don't. Trigger warning for a blade. I realize I didn't say that, but Mari had really, really good critiques of this book. I mean, and critiques that I did not see. And now that I do see them, I kind of feel like my enjoyment's going down a little bit. I almost wish I hadn't watched her review until I finished it, but I saw so many people in her comments were talking like, it was great to read while I was reading it, but I don't remember a thing about it. And I think that's fascinating. I really am fascinated by books that just don't tend to live long in the memory. And I think that this must be one of those, because a lot of people have been trying to remember what happened in it when they went into the prequel. And I don't really think I'm gonna have that problem, because my plan is to not let it sit too long before I move into the prequel. We will see. Anyways, that is my opinion right now. I will update you later after I finish cutting up this photo book. Well, it's update time. It's been a couple of days. It's been a hectic few days, so not a whole lot of reading has gotten done. So one thing I did want to update on is that I started Claremont's diary, and it's definitely not going to be something that I finish in this vlog or finish even within a couple of weeks. Reading someone's diary from this time is just not like reading a diary of the modern day to me. I think we have a conception in the modern day that reading a diary would be like reading someone's worst fears, or like things that they think about that they feel they can't tell someone else. And that's really not what the diary of the Regency period was. For Claire, this is mostly like recording the things that she's reading, recording quotes. That's also the way that Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley's diaries are set up. And so I think you constantly want more from it. You want more detail from it, which I think would be better conveyed in reading a selection of letters between them than it would be in reading their journals. Claire's a really interesting person, and the introduction to this, I want to say, this was done in 1968. And in the introduction, the person who put this together is pretty straight up about saying he thinks this may be the only published edition of her journals that she may get. And so I think it's interesting that the discussion of the introduction was entirely around Claire's relationship to Byron and Shelley, and how it would be Byron and Shelley scholars who would be reading her journals, looking for context on those poets. And in general, the introduction, I think, mentioned Mary twice, which I think is so wild, because I just kind of have the conception that here in the modern day, Mary Shelley has more name recognition than Percy or Byron does. And so I would think, even in the past 50 years, that somebody is reading Claire's journals with the hope to get more context for Mary. And in the 60s, maybe that's not true. This just kind of felt vaguely misogynistic to me. Like, the only reason you would read Claire has nothing to do with her and has nothing to do with her immediate family member, her immediate stepsister, Mary Shelley. It has to do entirely with her and her interactions with these famous men, which I'm not going to discount, because definitely I'm reading her journals for context on Mary and Percy specifically, but Claire had a relationship with Byron. I just thought the introduction was a little bit disrespectful, not just to Mary, but to Claire herself. Like, I'm just doing this because I think it may give us some more background knowledge on Percy or Byron, which I think is kind of the wrong way to go about it, because that's not really what she is recording 90% of the time. I think we want juicy details. So far, that's not really happening, but I'm very early on in her life. Her first journal starts kind of in the middle of things, so the possibility is that she probably had another journal. That must have disappeared somewhere along the way, or she just decided on this journey of the elopement with Mary and Percy that she was going to keep a journal alongside them and possibly publish it. So I don't feel weird reading her journal. I think a lot of people feel like they're invading someone's privacy, reading these diaries, reading these journals. But a lot of times they intended to publish these things. And so I don't feel like I'm invading her privacy. I think she would have wanted this one specifically, this first journal, published. It is fascinating. I will try and do an entire video about the things that I learned from this. I know that'll be a niche video, but it's been very interesting. An update on Priory. I am just kind of obsessed with Priory, honestly, because I really love the historical conversations ongoing. I think it very specifically references Renaissance England and Elizabeth I, Robert Dudley, and Cecil specifically. I can see that there is a lot going on in one of these kingdoms that just very obviously mimics that. The introduction said that Samantha Shannon is not pulling from any specific time or place, but I'm enjoying it. Like, that's the part of it that I think I'm enjoying the most as a history person. But one thing that I knew about this book going in is really the sapphic relationship. I am now over halfway through. Something has happened between them, but to me it had almost zero build. It's not like I was really excited for the moment that these characters would get together, and it feels like so far to me, the romance is an afterthought to the plot, which is the way I think I would prefer it, but I didn't feel any tension between their characters whatsoever before this moment. In fact, it almost felt out of the blue. So I'm interested to see how the romance continues throughout the book, but another complaint I've had is that now, about halfway through, multiple characters have died. They are not big names by any stretch of the imagination, but they are important to the POV characters, and I just felt nothing about any of their deaths. And I'm not saying that I should have been so attached to a side character that I needed to cry about it, but I think I should have felt something for the POV character that was attached to them. And that's maybe my overall complaint about the book, and maybe the thing that I think is the biggest critique I have is just in general the hollow nature of the characters. I am really interested in the plots. I'm interested in the political intrigue and the conversations that the characters are having, but a lot of the POV characters to me just feel like vehicles to look at certain places in the world for the plot. It actually really doesn't matter which character we are looking at that part of the world through, because to me they're not very distinct, and I'm not personally attached to any of the POV characters, which I think is a real shame. Well, I am going to end the vlog here because it has officially been a week. I feel like it's been a long time since I posted a reading vlog where I didn't actually finish anything, but I know that a lot of people do that. And I think this week, it just wasn't realistic to expect me to finish an 800-page book, which is definitely what I thought was going to occur at the beginning of the week. I had already started it prior to the start of this vlog, of course. I think I was a good 100 or so pages in before I did my first update, but I'm now at page 500, and I feel like that's pretty respectable. I think that's pretty successful reading in a week to say that I read 400 pages of this, which I'm gonna say is not all that dense of a fantasy. I don't necessarily feel confused by the world. I feel like a lot of people have said that is what they struggled with the most when they were trying to get into this book, was just being overwhelmed by all of the different terms, all of the different characters, everything that's going on in different parts of the world. And that is largely the reason why I decided to pick up a physical copy, because several people that I have seen read it recently said that they were constantly flipping back and forth to the glossary. They were constantly looking at like the list of characters in the back. And so I said, I might as well invest and get a physical copy and just have that on hand, tab it, because I know I'm probably going to have to do that. And yet I really haven't felt the impulse there at all. To me, in so many ways, this feels relatively simplistic, and I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I feel like it's a pretty straightforward good versus evil story. And I feel like at this point, weirdly enough, the villains, which are kind of the evil dragons, they have not factored into this in a way that has been meaningful at all to me. There have been a couple of really big scenes with them that have been wonderful and have been really exciting. And I just really loved one chapter in this that really encouraged me to keep going, because I'll say, last night I was reading this and I just wasn't feeling it. And I almost contemplated DNFing it, which is a weird thing when I'm over halfway through, but look at what I have left. It just feels like such a massive feat. And I was feeling like last night that this probably was not going to lead anywhere meaningful either. But a scene occurred that was so fantastic that I thought, okay, there is potential for this book to go somewhere that is great. So I feel like I have to see it out to the end. I feel like right now I kind of want to take a break from this, but I feel like if I do that, if I set it down, I'm probably not going to come back to it. And so I really don't want to run the risk of that. I have 300 or so pages left. And you would think that here in the second half, things are really going to amp up and things are really going to start happening. So I'm holding out hope for that. I don't have a bookmark in the journals of Claremont, mostly because I have been jumping around. I have not been doing things chronologically, which I know makes zero sense, but I am just kind of going with the flow, and I'm actually dipping in and out of years that I think are going to be the most interesting from Claire. And so this is fascinating, and I think the number one thing that has been the most interesting to me is that at the back of this edition, there is her reading list, and so there is a list of everything that Claire mentions having read throughout the journals. This is something that they also do in editions of Mary's journals and of Percy's, and that is easily the most exciting thing about Mary Shelley's journals, in my opinion. And what's really, really interesting to me is to compare Claire's reading list to the reading list of the Shelleys and just see where it overlaps. Claire is far more interested in plays and theater than it seems like Mary or Percy ever were. And I think Claire kind of had like a desire at one time or another to be on the stage, to be an actress. At least that is something that she told Byron, because if I'm not mistaken, she met Byron at the theater. And so that very well may have been true. That may have been a lifelong dream of hers. And so that's why she was attracted to plays and theater writing. But this is exciting. This is very interesting. It doesn't feel like a book that I can rate, of course, because it's very dull in parts. I mean, it is, in fact, just a diary. It is basically her recording what happened today. And what happened today might not be very exciting. And I feel like this in my own kind of journal writing. On days where a lot occurs, those are the days that you don't have time to write in your journal. And so it makes sense to me that the most exciting events are not ones that she actually comments on in any meaningful way. But here she is, April 7th, Sunday, April 7th. Easter Sunday, and today is Sunday, April 9th, Easter Sunday. Rain all day, I am unwell with a cough, translate Goethe. It's actually been raining here all weekend, and today is the first day we've seen the sun, so that's very interesting. But I am thoroughly enjoying this. Last but not least is Petrarch, and you'll probably notice that throughout the rest of this vlog, I never mentioned him again, and it is because I have basically decided that I want to put all of my thoughts and feelings into a separate Petrarch theme vlog, which I think I will do kind of in conjunction with my Renaissance series, because Petrarch is one of our kind of early Renaissance thinkers. He's just a writer who was kind of helping bring in that rebirth. And I think this is absolutely stunning. To go on and spoil some of my thoughts for that vlog, this is incredible poetry. Beautiful. I was reading it last night and I just went one time reading it. I mean, it was wild. Just incredible. I haven't felt like this in a very long time. What was in the water in Italy between around 1300 and 1600? What was going on over there? I would really love to know. But this is absolutely stunning. My edition includes the Italian and the English, and I am trying to struggle through that Italian before I read the English translation. It's not going well for me a lot of the time because I'm so literal. And then I read the translation and I'm like, where did you get that? And then I realize that if you interpreted a word kind of in a poetic sense, then it would make it more beautiful than just to say, like, there's one that's like disarmamento. And I said, okay, disarmed or unarmed. And the translation was like, when I face this fight without armor, with no armor. And I was like, no armor. No armor, but the word is literally translated as disarmed. And then I thought about it, and I thought about poetic license. And so it's interesting to try to see what a translator is doing as I am reading it. I mean, I can literally see from page to page what the translator changed or developed. And I think that's fascinating. It's just been a wonderful experience all around, but I am definitely recording my thoughts on this elsewhere. So that was kind of the first week of April wrapped up. I would love to know down below if you have read these and what your opinions on them are. And I would love to know what you were reading. Happy Easter on the day of filming this. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Goodbye.